Welcome. The form we're going to be learning today is actually a quoting form. A quoting form is just a grammar form that means someone quotes, meaning someone says, or maybe someone asks, or someone yells. Any sort of communication, anything that you would put quotes around is a quoting form. This form is also a quoting form. The way you make it is you take a verb stem and you conjugate it into the plain form, and then you attach nian and ta to the end. Now, plain form will always end with ta, except for the verb ida, as we'll see in a moment. So if you take hada, normally the plain form of hada is handa. So now you have handanda, handanda for the verb 먹다, to eat. 먹는다, 먹는단다, and you're done. Now, if you don't know how to make the plain form already, that's what I've written here. You take a verb stem and you attach a nian if it ends in a vowel, or nun if it ends in a consonant. If it ends in a lir, this letter, you first remove it, and then you'll attach a nian followed by ta. This form is actually short for the quoting form 타고 한다. So if you take hada, before I said you would get 한단다, originally it would have been 한다고 한다. 한다고 한다. 한단다. 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 It's just short for 타고 한다. What that means actually is you might see other versions of this. For example, like we could get 합니다. Well, what would happen to this? Instead of 단다, you might see 답니다. So 하다 would become 한답니다. Now, why would you use 한단다 or 한답니다? It only depends on the politeness level that you're using. Do you want to speak plain form, 한단다, or do you want to speak formally, 한답니다? So there's one more thing that we can also do to this form. You can use a verb in any tense. Normal verb stem of the verb 하다 is just 하. But what's the past tense of 하다? 했. So now you can get het, and it wouldn't be nian and nun because now we're talking about past tense. This nun is for the present tense because really you're just making the plain form, right? So now you have 했다고 한다, 했단다, or 했답니다. That's all there is to conjugating this form. And again, it is just a shortened version of the quoting form. The next thing you need to know is, when does this get used? Well, I said that it's simply a short version of 타고 한다 or 타고 합니다. So you can use it like that. But it also tends to get used often when you're conveying information from an older speaker to a younger listener. Kind of like an older speaker is teaching that younger listener. Let me give you an example. You might hear at the end of a story, like a fairy tale or at the end of a folk tale, that the story will end with this sort of ending. You also might hear it if someone's giving advice to someone that's younger than them. Like, hey, you know, this is what they say, like that. And what I'm telling you is just how it tends to get used, but not how it's always used, and not how it has to be used. So why is that? And what is this form again? This form is a quoting form again. So when you're using a verb with this form, what you're saying is 타고 합니다 or 타고 한다. So someone, we don't know who, somebody says whatever verb. But if we don't have the speaker in the sentence, 한국에 간단다, 한국에 간답니다. Someone says they're going to Korea. We don't know who is saying it. So because of that, this form can translate in many ways, but when it's used without a speaker, so when it's used without saying who said the quote, it tends to get used a lot in those sort of folk tales or fairy tales, or when an older person is giving advice to a younger listener, because it has the feeling of saying like, it is said that, or they say, that sort of feeling. But otherwise, this form just translates like that. It translates like, it is said that, or someone says, or I'm telling you that, or they say, or you know, like you should know because everyone says. So it's just a quote. And whether you have a subject that's saying that quote or not, you can still use it. But when you don't know the person who's saying the quote, it tends to kind of sound like maybe an older person is giving advice to a younger person. One more thing, if you have a noun plus ida and you want to use this form, so we want to say, they say, or someone says that something is something. For example, they say that this is the most popular song recently. So we're going to need to say, they say that it is. So how would we combine ida with 타고 한다? This is the same for when you make a quote with 이다. Not 타고, because 타고 comes from the plain form of other verbs. You would get 일하고, right? 일하고 한다. So then that leaves us with a different ending. 일한다. And what if we have 일하고 합니다? Well, we get 일합니다. Again, this is the exact same thing we were just doing with 단다 and 합니다, but now we're using the verb 이다. Also, I should note this happens with 아니다. 아니다 would also be 아니란다, 아니랍니다. The most common place you're going to see this, though, is actually when you're doing the future tense. Because what's the normal future tense? 것이다. Let's say 갈 거예요. So I'm going to go. 저는 갈 거예요. 한국에 갈 거예요. Well, this 예요 is the 이다 form. 갈 거란다. Or 갈 거랍니다, if you want to use the 니다 form and be more formal. So this is where you're going to see it used a lot. Let me do some example sentences. 오래오래 행복하게 살았습니다. 오래오래 is for a really long time. Ever after. 행복하다, to be happy. 행복하게, happily. 살다, to live. 살았습니다. So they lived happily ever after. Well, this is not how you would end a story, though, usually. When you simply say they lived happily ever after, you're saying it was so. That's what happened. But when a person is telling a story in Korean, instead you're going to hear in Korean lots of quotes. They all lived happily ever after, I heard. 오래오래 행복하게 살았답니다. And it is said that they lived happily ever after. So you have that kind of feeling of an older speaker teaching a younger listener, and it's used at the end of stories very often. 탄산음료 is soft drinks, so carbonated beverages, or soda, as we would say. 탄산음료만 마시면, so if you only drink soda, 배가 아프다, your stomach hurts. So 배가 아플 거예요, so your stomach will hurt. 거란다, 거라고 한다. They say, or you know, I heard. So they say if you just drink soda, your stomach's gonna hurt. 이 공사는, so this construction, this project, 내년에, next year, 끝나다, to finish, to complete. 이 공사는 내년에 끝날 거란다. They say, or I heard, that the construction, this construction is going to finish next year. 엄마 눈에는, so in my mom's eyes, 내가, I am, 제일, the most, 예쁘다, I'm the prettiest, 예쁘단다. So my mom says that I'm her prettiest daughter. 엄마 눈에는 내가 제일 예쁘단다. 사고가 나서, so because there was a 사고, an accident, 늦다, to be late, 늦었다, was late, 늦었답니다. So I heard they were late because there was an accident. 이게 요즘 제일 인기 있는 노래랍니다. So this is, I hear, lately the most popular song. So I heard this is the most popular song recently. 이게 요즘 제일 인기 있는 노래랍니다. 오늘 점심 중에, so in today's lunch, literally among today's lunch items, 딸기만, only strawberries, 맛있다, to be delicious, to taste good, to be good. 맛있었다, were good. So only the strawberries tasted good, they say. I heard that only the strawberries were good in today's lunch. And that's everything you need to know. Thanks for coming, and I will see you again next time. 그럼 다음에 또 봐.